All right, here we go. The PFF show entering week 2. Week 1 felt like it would never get here, and then it was over like that. So I'm here with Mike Renner, Eric Eager. We've got a fun half-hour planned for you. We're going to talk about all the games from week 2 from a betting, a fantasy, a showdown, and a props angle. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us and hanging out. We're going to get right to it with Thursday night football. Our hometown Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield. The Browns get blown out. Now they're 6-point favorites. So I'm going to start hot here. I think the better quarterback is getting 6 points in this game. Michael, what do you say to that?
I thought Burrow was the better quarterback as a prospect, for sure. I thought Mayfield was pretty close, though. And going into year 3, Mayfield should be better. I don't think he is, though. From what we saw last weekend, I think Joe Burrow probably is the better quarterback heading into this matchup, and I thought he got some momentum down the stretch in terms of, not momentum, confidence down the stretch in that 2-minute drill, leading him back, throwing that touchdown pass that gets called back, and he finished with a higher grade last week. So I do think the better quarterback may be getting 6 here.
I mean, you look at Burrow in the first half of last game, every time he dropped back, he averaged less than negative 0.5 expected points. I mean, they were dumping points when he was dropping back. I agree with you that he looked good down the stretch, but I mean, Zach Taylor has to look at that and say, okay, the front four for Cleveland, Larry Ogunjobi was over a 90 grade last week. That's just as good as the LA Chargers front four. We have to protect our quarterback, and when I think about that, they have to show some commitment to that for the whole game.
Okay, you mentioned the grade. The grade overall, fairly close, but where it separates is from a clean pocket, which we know is something that's more stable for quarterbacks. Joe Burrow, 82 grade from a clean pocket, was 10th overall. Baker Mayfield, just below 60. It was not pretty for Baker Mayfield, and I went back, as we all do, and we watched the games again, and Joe Burrow had a throw downfield that probably should have been caught by our boy John Ross. He then missed A.J. Green, I think it was, a little bit later in the game on an overthrow. And I agree with you, Mike. I thought they figured some things out, which were, first off, let's let Joe Burrow throw early, and let's get the ball out quickly. And I want to move now to some key matchups, because I think there are some, in addition to the quarterback matchup, where there could be a really interesting leverage play for either side. So, Mike, your key matchup that decides this game, what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think it's Myles Garrett, the right defensive end, going up against Jonah Williams, because they'll go pretty much every single play of that game. And you said they are about as good as the Chargers, but they're only good in a couple different places, the Browns. They're not complete across the board. I think if Jonah Williams can win this matchup, only allowed 3 pressures last week, I think if he wins that matchup against Garrett consistently, they have a chance to stop the rest. The rest of the offensive line has a chance. But that one, obviously Myles Garrett, highest pass rushing grade over the last 3 seasons of any edge rusher. Jonah Williams, 3 pressures, 63.1 pass blocking grade, but he was going up against Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram. Pretty tough matchup week 1, so we'll see how that one fares.
Yeah, I mean, that matchup gets mitigated, I think, a little bit if Cleveland can't cover on the back end, right? And when you look at Cleveland last week, Anderson Dejo grade, below 40. They have Greedy Williams out, and Carl Joseph is not the safety I think that the Raiders thought they got when they drafted him in the first round. If A.J. Green, who had a pretty solid comeback after a year off.
He's still healthy.
Tyler Boyd didn't do anything until the last drive. If they can actually, target him early on against a sort of a weak, interior of that, coverage unit, I think the Bengals can have some success offensively and mitigate the mismatch that they have, up front.
Both those matchups on the field, I think, are the 2 key ones. I'm going to take my key matchup to the sideline. To me, it's Zach Taylor versus Kevin Stefanski. Which one can create a scheme that better leverages the strengths of their quarterback? And we heard all along this offseason the Minnesota Vikings play action game. It was amazing. Well, Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns averaged 3.8 yards per play action play. Not very good. The Bengals, on the other hand, maybe they need to do a little bit more, but they were at least successful in that area. And I think Taylor, hopefully, can learn from a couple of things. That late game drive where they speed things up, and that blunder to trot out big old Randy Bullock to shank that field goal when there's still 7 seconds. Let Joey Burrow cook.
I love you bringing up play action there, because they kind of put training wheels on Joe Burrow in the first half last week. Quick game, RPOs, screens, things like that. But they didn't give play action. Only 7 dropbacks on play action. You look at Zach Taylor coming from Sean McVay there in Los Angeles. All they do, they lead the league almost every year in play action. Jared Goff was over 40% in week 1. That's what they got to go to protect Burrow. That's going to do a lot more to slow down the pass rush than keep going quick game. And I think you'll get some shots downfield with that talented receiving core.
Yeah, I think, and also Zach Taylor's still learning basic strategy of the NFL. They gave up all 3 timeouts before 6 minutes were left in the game. That made, people forget that the Bengals had a pretty impressive drive until Burrow rolled left and threw an interception a la Daniel Jones in Monday Night Football. And then they got the ball back and did it all again. I think they have to build off of those 2 drives if they're going to have success against a Cleveland defense that is really strong up front but really weak in the secondary.
All right, Browns are favored by 6. Your picks, I think I know what they are. Michael?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Bengals in this one. Like I said, I don't think they're 2 unevenly matched teams. And I think at the quarterback position, like I said, Joe Burrow's the better one at this point.
Yeah, I think you could take the Bengals plus 6. I think against the money line, it's also a good play. I'm going to go Bengals on this Thursday night.
I like the money line play as well. That would be bad. If the Bengals walk out of here with a win, there are going to be some questions coming down for the Browns, the new look Browns. All right, we're going to close it out with this. Props are now live. You can go check them out on PFF.com and figure out which ones make the most sense. We've picked out one for each of us. Michael, your prop is?
I'm going to go with Nick Chubb over 8.5 receiving yards.
Bold.
Everyone and their mother knows that the Bengals linebackers are a liability still. Akeem Davis-Gaither, Logan Wilson played low in week 1. Both had terrible coverage grades. That is where you want to attack. And I know he's not the receiving back there. Kareem Hunt's more that guy. But all it takes is one screen. And I think they're going to start targeting these linebackers on early downs. And that's when Chubb gets his over 8.5 yards.
I'm going to go with John Ross, under 2.5 receptions. You're going to have to pay a little bit for it. I believe it's minus 145. But he's a guy who, seemingly he's either going to go over that and catch 7 balls, or he's going to be basically a non-factor like he was last week. I'm going to go with non-factor. I think A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd are the ones that eat tonight.
All right, I'm going to close it out with another Browns running back under Kareem Hunt, 41.5 rushing yards. Because of what you mentioned, I think Nick Chubb is the guy that they're going to run the ball with, and if they're going to throw the ball, probably more of a time for Kareem Hunt to shine. 41.5, it feels low, but when you're in the third quarter and he's got 8, you're going to be concerned. We will be right back with a little bit of Fade the Public Noise Plays. I think that's what it is. I'm actually not even sure if that's the next segment, but we'll be back in a second, so hang on. Heading into week 2, there's one thing that always happens, and that's people overreact to what happened in week 1. There's no team people are getting more excited for, and probably rightfully so. Aaron Rodgers playing great is great, but people are really excited about the Packers. They're a 6-point favorite against the Detroit Lions. DeAndre Swift just absolutely blows what should have been a victory for the Lions. And you can see the public coming in really strong with the Packers. 83% of the cash has been bet on the Packers, about 65% of the tickets. You can see that all the way, by the way, at PFF.com on our betting dashboard. So my question to you, Eric, is 6 too rich?
Yeah, 6 is too much. I mean, last year when these two teams played in Lambeau with fans, Green Bay was opened at 6-point favorites. It got bet down to 3.5, 4. Detroit didn't win the game, but they covered that number. And when you look at these two teams, they're not all that much different. There is a philosophical change that Aaron Rodgers overcame, this offseason to throw more on rhythm. He was also really accurate. He led the league in accurate plus percentage via our charting. But Detroit can score the football. And last week against the Packers, Minnesota scored 34 points. And I think that when you look at this game, if you're going to lay a full touchdown, you got to be worried about Matthew Stafford and the Lions coming through the back door and covering the spread, late in the game.
Big difference between Kirk Cousins and Matt Stafford. One of whom I'm a little more confident can actually get you through the back door. That's Matt Stafford. On the other side of things, Kirk Cousins is like the opposite of that. I just know they're laying down and dying. And interestingly, he did rack up a bunch of garbage time, nice throws down the football field, Adam Thielen. I look at this Detroit Lions team, though, and I think about last year with Matt Stafford. They were a top 5 offense, throwing the ball down the football field. And they might have a banged up defense, but it can't be as non-existent as what the Minnesota Vikings trotted out there at corner. So, Devontae Adams is amazing, but he is still just one player. And after that, the Packers do have some receivers that aren't the greatest things in the world. Keeping this close to me, even if it is a high-scoring game, is something that the Lions can do.
Yeah, I mean, we have Green Bay. They looked great last week, but we only have them as 2.7 points above an average team on a neutral field. So we still have to slow our roll here. There's going to be a lot of overreacting. Don't let what was pounded into the betting markets for months and months and months be swayed by one game against a very flawed Minnesota Vikings team with no fans.
That being said, Aaron Rodgers, 6 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays. Hasn't done that in like 5 years.
Yeah.
He was amazing, and it's great. It's great to be a witness to the Aaron Rodgers revenge tour. By the way, you can go check out the numbers for this game and all of the other games on PFF.com. We'll be right back with a little fantasy advice for you. Best game of the weekend, Seattle, New England, that new look Patriots offense. Actually, kind of looks sort of familiar to something we've seen in Baltimore over the past couple of years. But Cam Newton running that offense goes to Seattle. They're 4-point favorites at home, no fans. And I'm going to start with you, Eric. Can Cam and that offense keep up with what is now a let Russ cook regime in Seattle?
I don't think so. I mean, when I look at an offense like this, I think about it as a front runner offense. You're able to move the football, when you are allowed to be varied, when you're ahead, when the other team's back on their heels, when they can't, allow 4 or 5 yards of play and sort of give that to you in lieu of passing. When they're going to be forced to throw, and I think they're going to be behind in this one, they're underdogs, and this line continues to move towards Seattle. The question is can Cam make the plays to a group of receivers that isn't very strong against a secondary which struggled a week ago, but is generally speaking pretty good from a talent perspective?
See, I'm not so sure they fall behind because everyone talking about this Patriots team heading into the season, they're going to take a big step back. They still have arguably the best secondary in the NFL. Mm-hmm. This is still, they are good where you want to be defensively. J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore match up far, far better with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett than anything Atlanta was throwing out there. And I think these two teams are just so new in terms of what we saw from them week one. Russell Wilson throwing the ball all over the place. The New England Patriots running basically the Baltimore Ravens run-heavy offense and play-action-heavy offense that I don't really know which way this one's going to go. They're just too different from what we saw last season.
No, you make a good point. Will they actually fall behind is the huge key to me. And you look at Cam Newton in week one, 13 designed runs, most he's had in 6 years, picks up a first down or a touchdown on 7 of those. Mm-hmm. They were running light personnel, they were going empty, and he was just trucking dudes. And a lot of the time didn't have to until he was 5 yards down the football field. So to me, this game could be won or lost from a spread perspective for New England in the first 15. And then, as you said, on the other side, will Russell Wilson, who's the second highest graded quarterback in week one, be able to air it out like he did in Atlanta?
Yeah, and that's really the question, right? Because I feel like this game has 3 possible outcomes. It's Seattle, steamrolls them, and Cam can't do a whole lot, or this game's a pretty close game. And I think even in the close game scenario, we've seen Russell Wilson, that's exactly where he's thrived over the years in making plays near the end of the game. Against Atlanta, he didn't have to because they did it all at the beginning. But in this game, I still think he's got it in him, and his offense has it in them to make plays, especially with the New England front that I don't think can take advantage of Seattle's offensive line the way that some other defenses can.
Yeah, New England's defensive line may be the worst pass rushing defensive line in the NFL. It's just not going to be good. They're not going to be able to get pressure on Russell Wilson without blitzing, though. But that's the thing. They will blitz. That's going to be, Bill Belichick is going to scheme up some pressures there. So I do think that it will be a tight game in the end. But like I said, I don't know which way to go with this because I do worry about Seattle reverting back to that run-heavy offense.
I'm not. I have faith in Pete Carroll. I do think these teams are kind of evenly matched. And for that reason, though, I'm not picking this game. 4 is tough for me. I know it's moving out towards Seattle. Eric, which side would you go?
I'm going to chase the steam. I'm going to go Seattle minus the points.
Chase the steam. You also said there are 3 outcomes to a game, which is another bold take of yours.
Yeah, see, I'm not picking this one. I just, like I said, I don't know enough about these two teams. They were just too different from what we saw.
All right, moving on to Atlanta, Dallas. Dallas, a 4.5-point favorite at home. Dallas struggled to put up points against a Rams team that they have a couple superstars, but I wouldn't call them a defensive juggernaut. And so the question here is this. Dak Prescott is going to have to keep up with Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley, who are fantastic. Mike, can they do that?
I think they can. They're just going to have to give Terrence Steele some help pretty consistently. The right tackle, UDFA, he was an issue, and he was an issue against Leonard Floyd. Yeah. That's about as easy a matchup as you're going to get all season. Now he goes against Dante Fowler, most likely, even though he played on the right side. I would imagine they're going to try to exploit that matchup. They're going to need to get him some help, chips, whatever you want to do, because you could see in Dak Prescott, he was worried about that pressure coming, well, obviously Aaron Donald in the interior, but also from that right side. And when he's worried, he's not the same quarterback whatsoever when he has that solid offensive line. So that's going to be the biggest sort of storyline to me is can Dak Prescott basically have that confidence in his offensive line to make throws down the field.
The total on this game is 52.5. Last Sunday night, the total was 51.5 in a Dallas game. We all thought this game's going to go over. There's going to be tons of points. But you look at these two quarterbacks last week, a combined one turnover-worthy play between the two. Matt Ryan lost, and the fact that his team lost by double-digit scores was amazing. This week, I think you see Calvin Ridley do what he did a week ago. We have him with over a 20% chance of getting 25 fantasy points on DraftKings. He's just he's a player that I think is going to take advantage of a Dallas secondary that is just too thin. It was too thin to cover the Rams last week, let alone this team in the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, for my money, so Dallas, a 4.5-point favorite, but they've got to cover two top 10 receivers. And to me, that is a little too much to lay when you've got to do that and you don't have any corners that you really feel that great about doing so. So for that reason, I'm rolling with the Falcons. I know this is something people have heard me do and then cry about repeatedly. So I probably will again, but I'm doing it anyways. Michael.
I'm going to go with Dallas here. I do think that it will get back on track offensively. And it's because the Atlanta Falcons have far, far worse cornerbacks than what they were seeing with the Los Angeles Rams.
You look at last week, Dallas gained almost a third of an expected point running the football, but were negative passing the ball. Hopefully they don't learn from that. I think they'll be still a little bit slow to go. This number has come from about a touchdown all the way down to 4.5. I'm, again, going to take the side in which it's moving. I'm going to go to Atlanta plus 4.5.
You mentioned Calvin Ridley with a chance to explode with 25-plus DraftKings fantasy points. We're going to talk other receivers that have a great chance to blow up in Week 2 next.
Well, we're back to talk fantasy football. I'm Eric Eager. This is Ian Hartitz, the man that told you that Robert Woods would blow up on Sunday Night Football last week. We're here to talk about blow-up candidates at the wide receiver position. These are guys who our model says have a pretty good chance of going over 25 DraftKings fantasy points or 20 FanDuel points, depending upon where you are, that are over what they're being priced here. So I'm going to first talk about Brashad Perriman, the Jets wide receiver here. Ian, what do you like about this play?
Man, it sounds so disgusting when we say it out loud. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I made in the entire 2019 season, was not getting on Brashad Perriman after Mike Evans and Chris Godwin had late season injuries. Because, if you stop watching football in the year 2017, you wouldn't think much of Brashad Perriman at all. But let's face it, his last two stops with the Browns and with the Buccaneers, he's been a great wide receiver. And coming into this season with the Jets, the only concern with him was injury. But we look at the snap rates from week 1, and he did not miss a single offensive snap with the Jets. Now, unfortunately, there are Jets wide receivers are banged up right now, specifically Jamison Crowder with a hamstring injury, midweek addition to injury report. I mean, this guy, funnels 13 plus targets to himself seemingly on a weekly basis. So there is more than enough opportunity to go around in this passing game. And Perryman's good enough to do something with it. I understand the matchup against the 49ers isn't great on paper, but, you pull back the curtain just a little bit. We got Richard Sherman on IR now. Akello Witherspoon is looking questionable for the game at best. We're going to have Perryman against some backup corners. And, even if Sam Darnold and Adam Gase, if you don't want to put your neck out for those guys, I get it. But all we need are 8 targets or so to meet value. And I think Perryman is certainly in line for that.
Yeah, the Niners last week with DeAndre Hopkins, they were able to produce, defensively a great game for a number 1 wide receiver in his debut with the Cardinals. Let's go to LA and talk about Mike Williams in a matchup against Kansas City, who, like San Francisco, is probably going to miss 2 starting cornerbacks in week 2.
Yeah, just attack these weak secondaries. I mean, I feel like, sometimes we get caught up a little more focusing on run defenses. But if you're a secondary that has banged up cornerbacks, you're already maybe middling against the pass, those are situations we're looking to target. And I know Keenan Allen's been the man in, LA and San Diego before that for several years now. But, Mike Williams, new quarterback under center in week 1, he sure looked like the man. Tyrod Taylor, fearless in throwing downfield, not always exactly where he wants the ball to go, but we saw all the talent in the world from Mike Williams that made him that first-round pick back in the day in the first place. This dude had 2 just incredible one-handed catches where unfortunately he couldn't get his feet in bounds, but you saw the ceiling there, and it's, going into the season, we knew this Chargers passing game could be kind of up in the air in terms of who will be the number 1 guy, Keenan, Henry, even Eckler, even Mike Williams. Well, through 1 week, it looks like Mike Williams, the shoulder looked healthy, and yeah, like you said, man, another matchup against the secondary with some banged up cornerbacks. So I like going back to well here with Mike Williams. We saw Tyrod, utilize a 16% deep ball rate in week 1. That's up from Phillip Rivers' 13% rate from last season. We might be looking at a Chargers offense where Mike Williams is the wide receiver 1 in 2020.
Okay, now you targeted Dallas last week with a total of 51.5. Now the total is 52.5, and there are two wide receivers opposing them who are huge blow-up candidates in Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. They had some Russell Gage take some of their targets away this week, but what do you like about those two wide receivers in Atlanta?
It's another good matchup, and not just, against these Cowboys corners. Credit to Diggs for being really close to making some big plays last week. But, close doesn't cut it, especially when you're now facing two players the caliber of Ridley and Julio. So, matchup isn't anything to worry about. And you just look at the game as a whole. And one of the things I looked at in my Mismatch Manifesto article is the pace of every game per week. And we're looking at two of the, 3-4 fastest moving offenses in the entire NFL going to war this Sunday afternoon. So I think both sides are going to have a ton of plays. This game just screams shootout. And the Falcons have one of the most condensed passing games in the league right now. We know they're going to throw the hell out of the ball, and we know Julio and Ridley are going to be on the other end of most of those. So after 1 week of action, the top two receivers in the league in total air yards are number one, Julio Jones, number two, Calvin Ridley. I think we all know Julio's the top three wide receiver. He has been for the better part of the last decade. But, if you haven't come around to Ridley by now, it's time. And, in the fantasy community, we've been calling, 2019 Chris Godwin, 2020 Calvin Ridley. We've been making that comparison all offseason. And the rationale has always been simple. You had Godwin in 2019, proven talent, entering a situation without Djax, without Adam Humphries, primed for more targets. We had Calvin Ridley going to 2020, proven talent, entering a situation where no more, we had, oh my goodness, we had Mohamed Sanu out of the picture, looking good. The guy's had 9 career games with at least 8 targets. He has not scored in only one of those games, at least 70 yards every time. The floor is the roof for Calvin Ridley, and we already know Julio Jones is up there.
Yeah, it's really hard to look at a game script in that game where you don't see a ton of passing out of Atlanta. Either when they're ahead, that's how they get ahead, or when they're behind, as you saw last Sunday, where those guys can really eat. Thank you, Ian, for all your great insights, and we'll look forward to him again next week.
We're talking DraftKings Showdown for the Thursday night slate. We've got a barn burner here with Cincinnati and Cleveland. This is very different from last week when we had two great quarterbacks. So I have a feeling you're going to tell me there might be some players other than quarterback that I'm considering. Showdown, of course, the captain counts as 1.5 times the point. So it's very important to get that right. And that's why I brought in Kevin Cole to take me through this. So Kevin, help me, brother.
Yeah, first looking at the captain selections, again, you said this is not a high total game, so these numbers aren't going to be astronomical for some of the top options. But in particular, the Browns, I have a feeling, may be undervalued here versus what some people have seen in the betting markets because they are still the 6-point favorite. So if we go down the top options here, still number one is Joe Mixon. He's the one guy who really looks like a workhorse type running back. So he's the number one option as far as how much we think he'll be in an optimal lineup. But again, his ownership is going to be really, really high. Following that, we have a list of Browns here. We have Baker Mayfield being next. He's probably one of the more surprising options after people being very down on him for performance last week. And after that, it's followed by Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham, and the other running back, Kareem Hunt. Now, when we look at ownership versus this, and that's the important part of these contests, is to get a lower ownership on these players when you're choosing them. Surprisingly, Baker Mayfield ends up being the best option if you want to outpace the field.
I guess that kind of makes sense, right? If you look at the two quarterbacks, we just talked about this earlier, we all think that Joe Burrow is the better quarterback, and it seems like public sentiment is obviously really down on Baker, and for that reason, they're going to want to fade him. Also, the difference between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals probably can't be underscored enough because that is vast, and it's going to feel probably a lot different for Baker going up against this team. Talk to me a little bit more about some options, maybe in my flex position, or some players who maybe I don't even know how to pronounce their names, but I need to figure it out and get them in my lineup.
Yeah, this is, like I said, low-scoring matchup, so you're going to find some unusual players, some players who maybe only need a couple of catches or just one touchdown to get inside your optimal lineup. So, starting at the top here, we have Gio Bernard. Now, again, he's kind of the flip side of that Joe Mixon equation. If we see a scenario where the Bengals get down early, Bernard had a 15% target share last week. He could get close to that amount, and he's at very much at a lower price. Now, as we continue to work down, now these two names are really not exciting, but again, play into this matchup, and that's Cody Parkey as the kicker. Now, there's a little bit of a wrinkle there because they just picked him up this week. So the last kicker that they had there Austin Seibert was just let go. So there are people who may even have the wrong kicker in their lineup this week. Following that is the Browns defense. Facing a rookie, as much as we like Burrow, he took 3 sacks last week. He threw a poor interception. He could have another struggling time this week. The implied total on this game for the Bengals is under 19. It's a very low-scoring matchup, so the defense can come to play there. After that, we have C.J. Uzomah. And if you look at C.J., he ran 32 routes last week. That's more than A.J. Green. He had 5 targets. People probably aren't thinking about him as a main weapon on that offense, but he could end up being that this year. And lastly, again, Baker Mayfield. Quarterbacks are normally stronger flex options than they are captain options because of the fact that they have that solid floor. So Baker, he looks like he's a value in either one of these 2 slots.
There are people predicting that the floor falls out from underneath Baker Mayfield tonight. So it wouldn't surprise me. A guy that made his debut on Thursday night, did so in kind of historic fashion for the Browns, figures out a way to contribute tonight. That was 3 minutes and 50 seconds of knowledge, but Kevin Cole writes a whole article on this, so you can spend 15, 20, 30 minutes figuring this out to get yourself in the right mindset for tonight. That's over at PFF.com. Kevin Cole, enjoy this one, buddy. All right, we're going to close this Week 2 Thursday PFF show out with a few more games. First one, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, and the Chiefs are going to Los Angeles to play the Chargers at SoFi. I'm going to kick this one off because I've talked about this game a bunch. I believe that everyone thinks that the Chiefs are nice and they're fine and they're really good. But, it wasn't that impressive from Patrick Mahomes. He comes out guns blazing. I know that they're 8.5-point favorites. But that is still, I think, too short for me because of how bad the Chargers are. They probably should have lost to the Cincinnati Bengals. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. Tyrod Taylor is far from that. Your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I have to see it from Tyrod Taylor as far as being able to sort of push the ball down the field, to make plays consistently offensively. And I need to see it from the Chargers insofar as not relying too much on Austin Eckler in the ground game. To win this football game, they're going to have to throw, and they're going to have to throw often. They're going to have to be efficient, and I just don't see that happening. I'm a little bit worried about the back door as far as the 8.5 being over a bunch of key numbers, but Kansas City in a teaser is a pretty good play.
Yeah, if you're going to beat Patrick Mahomes, you're going to have to score like 30. That is what you're going to have to do to beat this offense. That's what he's done over the course of his career. I don't see how the Chargers are scoring 30. They're not going to score 30 a lot of times this entire year. And while I love their defense to, match up with that offense and what they can do in terms of their zone coverages, I just don't see this offense the way they ran it last week with only 5 option runs with Tyrod Taylor, barely utilizing him. They should take a playbook out of the Patriots offense and what they did in terms of getting some offense out of a run-heavy quarterback there. If they do that again against the Chiefs, it's not even going to be close.
Plus, you look at that Chiefs offensive line, a little bit better than what the Bengals trotted out there with Mitchell Schwartz and company. All right, the Baltimore Ravens steamrolled, much to Odell Beckham Jr.'s enjoyment, the Cleveland Browns. And now they are going to play Houston on a little bit of extra rest. They are 7-point underdogs at home. So the question is this: Deshaun Watson, we all love him, but can he put this team on his back and keep it close with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens? Mike, your thoughts?
I think he needs Bill O'Brien to let him put the team on his back and beat the Ravens here. And it's going to come with downfield shots. They did not have any shot plays schemed in that Thursday night opener against the Kansas City Chiefs. Get some play action rolling and let those 4-3, 40 wide receivers go down the football field. They only had 3 completions, 10-plus yards in that game. And those all came late when they were basically garbage time throws. They need to take some shot plays. Only 15% play action rate last Thursday night. That has to be much, much higher in this one.
It's a hot take for this game. I think Houston's weapons are better than Baltimore's. And so if Houston goes out there and actually does the things that Mike talked about, and they're aggressive and they don't punt the ball on 4th and 4 from the 50 when the game's tied, I think they have a chance to cover this number, especially 10 days rest. Baltimore, obviously, blowing out Cleveland. There's a little bit of a letdown here. I think Houston can keep this close, and I think it'll be sort of a nice omen for them as they move forward in a season where early on their schedule is really tough, but later on I think that they'll be a force.
I'm a little concerned. I'm with you guys, and I have Houston keeping this one close, although I'm not excited about it. I would take Houston +7. Titus Howard being absolutely terrible scares me because I think Baltimore is the type of team that is going to take advantage of that. He had just a 49 pass block grade, which is good for 54th amongst tackles last week, and that would concern me just ever so slightly. Are you guys on board with Houston plus the points, or are you going Ravens?
I'm going to go Ravens in this one because I don't trust them to make that change. And, you're on a vastly different offense than we saw last Thursday in Baltimore. They just, like you said, steamroll. That's what they're going to do every single week. They're a difficult offense to stop week in and week out.
Yeah, it's really hard to get in front of Baltimore. We tried it last week with Cleveland; it didn't work. But I'm going to do it again. I think Deshaun Watson's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL moving forward, and it's really difficult to bet against a guy like that.
I'm with you guys. All right, we're going to close it out with this. Give me one more side that you guys like. Eric, we will start with you.
Well, the Washington football team is catching 6.5 on the road against Arizona. Look. The Cardinals are a plucky team. They had a nice little win against the San Francisco team that was really decimated on offense and eventually on defense. But I look at them, and Kyler Murray was still only like 6.5 yards average at the target, 5.5 yards per pass when he was completed. And it was worse, when they didn't use play action. I don't think that this team throws enough in the intermediate part of the field, and so I don't think that they can separate enough to warrant a spread like this.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the 49ers only giving 7 points on the road to the Jets. The Jets look like probably the worst team in the NFL week 1. And just up and down on that roster, it has the least amount of talent in the NFL. And your best probably player offensively from week 1, Mekhi Becton, has an injured knee going up against Nick Bosa. I just think that one's going to be ugly. Not that I trust the 49ers offense to turn things around right away, but I just don't see the Jets putting up much points.
I can't lawfully side with you there, because if so, I'm destined for doom. But I do love Raheem the Dream Mostert running all over New York. I'm going to go to Pittsburgh, where the Broncos are 7.5-point underdogs. And to me, this is a bit of a public reaction to seeing Big Ben back, throwing a couple of touchdown passes to what I believe is one of the worst teams in the NFL as well, the New York Giants. And the Denver Broncos, they didn't do everything really well, but they did it without Courtland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy would have had a monster game if not for drops. Those we know are unstable. I'm back on the Jerry Jeudy train. In this one, if you want more, go to PFF.com. Get yourself a subscription. Check out all the good stuff we have, betting, fantasy, props. It's all there, all for you. Enjoy week 2. Let's have some fun. See you guys.